Welcome to the Dear Applicants podcast, where we dive into practical tips, insightful interviews, and explore personal stories that will hopefully inspire and motivate you to pursue your dreams and achieve your university admission goals. Hello, students and parents, and welcome to another episode of Dear Applicants. I'm your host, Jonathan, and with me today is Faith, our English SAT teacher here at IvyPrep. Thank you for coming down all the way to the office for this.
Oh. No problem.
Well, I was going to introduce you, but then I wanted to leave it up to you because you have a very colorful, I'd say, background, childhood. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about you?
Okay, sure. So now, obviously, I'm currently the SAT English teacher here at IvyPrep, but it's not my first foray into the teaching space. So before that, I was working, I've worked in a few different lines within the education sector. And I'd say what really drew me to becoming a teacher in the first place was my mom, because she's also a teacher. My mom, actually, when I was younger, she went back to school to complete her bachelor's in English. And then I remember I would go to school and my mom would also go to work and work in a school and substitute teach all day and then come home. And she still managed to take care of my sister and I. And I really admired that. And it really kind of drove me also throughout my life and why I decided to pursue teaching ultimately.
Why did she decide to pursue teaching?
I would say that ultimately for her case, it was a bit more practical because if you're a teacher, you have nice holidays, your hours. She could still work full time, but she had the same schedule as my sister and I. She would still have spring break. She could still attend all of our sports games, all of our club events, whatever was going on. She could still kind of have the best of both worlds, which is to be a mom and to support us and work.
And so ever since you were a kid, you knew that you wanted to be a teacher. It's going to be the long-term thing? Or did you?
There were a few, I feel like I was always kind of teaching adjacent because I also viewed teaching as something where you get the best of both worlds, where you're not stuck in an office for several hours, you're not forced to, or even stuck at a hospital, stuck in any kind of position that forces you into one kind of track in life. And I feel teaching is very balanced in that way, where you do have more. Your work-life balance is quite good. So, of course, there's other things that you think about later on in life. Like, there's other dreams, like maybe I could still be a writer or curate in a museum or be a librarian. All these things I feel are still open paths for me. The teaching is like the practical route for this point.
Okay. And we'll get to you in your time in Rutgers and your teaching experience pre-IvyPrep in a little bit.
Okay.
But for now, I want to talk about New Jersey, growing up there. So I don't know too much. I visited once, and of course, I've watched The Sopranos.
We've talked a lot about that.
Yes, I've been to New Jersey.
Oh my goodness.
I won't be able to tell you which part of New Jersey. Some seedy motel somewhere.
That's good. You know more than most.
But growing up at Tom's River, what was that like?
So I would say I think everyone has a funny relationship with their hometown, kind of like the relationship they might have with their parents, where they love certain parts of it and then they question certain parts of it and they wonder, should I do something differently? Should I try to learn something else? So I say with my hometown, Tom's River, it's in a very, it's a densely populated state, and like the hub of like New York is in the north, Philly's to the west, and Washington, D.C. is like roughly to the south. So it's just it's a large
congruence
suburb.
of all these,
Yeah.
Cool.
So there is a river, but it's a big suburb, and there's
still only about 60,000 people, right? So it's
still relatively large for the U.S.
Right.
I would say compared to other parts of the U.S. where it's super rural.
And you were telling me that, I guess, before the camera started rolling, that you found it to be a pretty diverse town.
So within New Jersey, I would say it's not maybe the top, but it is kind of up there. I'd say the more north in New Jersey you go, then the more nearer to the cities you are, the more diverse stuff you'll find. So my university was a bit more towards the north, but even in my hometown, it's not like a monolingual space, I would say. So that also led to a lot of like early age. Like I feel fortunate to have been surrounded by all these funds of knowledge since I was a little girl. So.
And I'm guessing that you were sort of exposed to people from a bunch of different backgrounds. You were saying, of course, it was a multilingual environment from a pretty early age. And New Jersey was where you actually had Laksa for the first time, right?
Yeah.
Where'd you find
This was in Papa Rich in Edison. Shout out. I don't know. Alice. She, anyway, New Jersey has even like we had our favorite like mala place in our college town. Like it's not I feel you're never like so separate from the world. I mean, there's even like 4 airports within driving distance. there are, again, of course, I'd say there's pockets. Like there's a very rural part of New Jersey and there's a very urban part of New Jersey before you're in the city proper, so-called. So
You were slightly outside,
largish
right?
suburb, I would say.
So was it more urban or was it a little bit more?
I'd say more suburban.
Oh, more, okay.
Yeah. But there's 3 high schools, 4 high schools now. So there's a lot of student body that feeds into there. So
Then you went to public school, right?
yeah, I went to like a school where, so public school in the US context, different than the UK. Public school means that like because we were taxpayers, we got to go there just by virtue of being taxpayers. There was no like fees associated with it or anything.
You
It was
just went.
the school up the street,
And when you weren't in school, we've had tons of conversations about what we were up to outside of school, but you were a big gamer, weren't you?
Yeah, I was I feel like video games are it's like reading, but you interact a bit more with the story. So I feel like a lot of my time, a lot of like the formative years, I was just like playing Animal Crossing, or I was like farming in Harvest Moon.
Your formative years, you were playing Animal Crossing.
Yes, who wasn't?
Okay, and then any others?
Any others? The Legend of
so
Zelda
my
is
earliest-
like my biggest one.
The earliest game I remember playing, well, obviously when I was a kid, I had a PS2 or whatever, and then you have all those normal games. But one of the first PC games I ever played was, I think they made it into a TV show, that Carmen San Diego thing.
No way!
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember playing some other random game. It was one of these like adventure things where you have to do math and English. And basically my parents said, like, if he's going to play a video game, might
Like
as well learn
Storybook
something
Weaver.
from it. Yeah. And there were these ads for Carmen San Diego, and I was like, who is this person in that red coat?
Yes.
Why is she so mysterious?
We need to know her.
So I harangued my parents until they bought it for me, and then I ended up playing it. I was very excited. The TV show is out, right?
The Carmen San Diego TV
Isn't
show.
there a
Now
TV
I
show
need-
or movie? I
That's
don't
what
know.
we'll
We
do
should-
next episode.
Yeah, that's
We'll
what we will do
discuss
next episode.
The review of the Carmen San Diego
Right.
TV show.
The reason why I'm staying on video games so much is because they were pretty important to you beyond just playing
Yeah.
it, right?
So I have my own philosophy, but before I dive too much into that, I read a book recently that came out this summer, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. And it talks about, of course, it's about 2 kids growing up and they love video games and then they become video game creators.
Mhm.
And also how like video games can immortalize things, how we can kind of leave pieces of ourselves in these video game files. So I think that video games kind of toe the line very nicely of like being a form of art that is easy to participate in. If I bring someone to an art gallery, they might have a hard time appreciating things. So they might feel a bit distanced from what they see on the wall. They might say like, "Oh well, I'm not sure what's romantic art. I can't quite relate to that." But if you
Mhm.
kind of present those concepts in a video game, I think it becomes more accessible. I'm also thinking of another video game. The name escapes me, but later I can link it, where it's like a World War I themed game.
Okay.
And you take a role of like a French soldier and you go through. And of course, it's like highly educational, but it's also fun. So it puts me in a story. Of course, you can read novels, you can read firsthand accounts, you can read.
I guess it's the visual element that,
Yeah,
that
like
is
you're-
particularly appealing, right? When you're
You're
doing a video game.
more immersed, I would say.
Yeah,
So
especially if it's a first person game, then you're.
Yeah, you are.
There,
You
right?
feel like yourself becoming the character is quite close. So
Is this something that you're interested in doing yourself, or you're interested more in it from an academic lens? Because it does have that sort of, I guess what you're talking about over here is still very much an educational aspect to video games, right? It's not just something for personal enjoyment, but you're taking away from it. And of course, from my interactions with you, ever since you joined at IvyPrep, you're someone who's constantly thinking about the student's experience, right? And how that can be bettered, how that can be heightened. So,
Sure. I would say, especially with video games, I wouldn't say I'm like interested in like going to learn a bunch of
Yeah,
coding
software
and like
development,
working to anything in that line, but even maybe from like a writing perspective, because I think what makes it interesting is maybe if I'm writing a story, I'm like, okay, the girl went to breakfast, she ate eggs, she ate baked ziti for lunch. Like I'm imagining a third person that may have overlaps with myself or whomever I'm trying to describe, or whatever composites of character I'm using from my own life. But in a video game, you're always imagining like the interface is the player, right? Or the user or the users, right? If it's a multiplayer game or something. So maybe I wouldn't even call it like an academic lens, but more of like an art lens.
Okay.
So, yeah.
no, that's really, really interesting. What are you playing right now?
Right now, like the last game I played. So we just started playing Witcher. I have slept on it for, it came out when we were studying.
On the PC? Or,
Yeah, on
okay.
the PC. So I truly just started it on Saturday, and I'm like, my mind is only there.
I'm gonna come and watch while you play, and
Yes.
then of course,
meet our cat.
yes, and meet your cat, which
Yes.
led me to the next topic, which is you grew up with quite a lot of animals in the house, right?
Yeah, we always had. I think my mom could never like turn an animal away. So even now,
So they all sort of foster. Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So when I was younger, we had a golden retriever and a basset hound, and maybe if for people who care about those things, they were like maybe more on the pure. Like I think they came from a breeder, but I
Okay.
can't quite recall. And then now my mom has 3 dogs and 2 cats, quite happily. So, and the US does lend that kind of lifestyle, right? Because you have a yard, so it's like more suitable for having that amount of pets. In Singapore, I don't know if I could imagine.
It's okay. One day you live in your massive black and white bungalow
Yes,
with lots of
and
dogs.
they'll
I
just
will
come
manifest
in.
it for you. But in the meantime, you have Iman,
Yes,
and
yes,
we can
yes.
we link a picture of her?
Yes, of
Link a
course.
picture of her
I have
up
so
here,
many.
you know, the cat. Okay, Jeremy's giving us a face, but
Yes.
yeah.
But it can be done.
Yeah, I guess anything about your upbringing that we've missed out on, anything you feel as though is really important, really interesting?
I would say maybe the one thing I want to just mention is my sister also. Because my sister, like, if I'm soft, my sister is like very like go-getter, like, so it's also interesting to, of course, when you grow up with someone like a sibling, you feel that you've grown up in really like the most like similar environment possible, right? So I guess another thing I think about and why I'm grateful to have a sibling is even though we grew up in the same environment, right, with the same person raising us and looking after us and kind of guiding us, we both became such different people. So I'm also grateful to have her as like a kind of mirror in my life. Or when I'm being too soft, she's like, no, you got to go back to the DMV.
Most of the time, right?
Yeah.
You got to go back to the DMV. And
Yeah, the
find-
DMV one time they made me cry because she like wouldn't change something on my license. I was younger then. I'm more tough now.
How
don't
dare
worry.
they?
I know.
Come
I
with
was
you
just
next
like, no, like, but I think that's also speaks to the US, like bureaucracy systems are just quite like, do your best, you know, and we'll figure it out.
I've heard nightmares about the DMV.
Before we continue, I would like to take a quick break to remind you to subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review on your favorite platform. Your feedback helps us improve and to reach a wider audience to provide further insight into this arduous journey. Also, if you have any questions or suggestions for future episodes, feel free to email us at our email linked in the description below. We'd love to hear from you.
Where is your sister? Is she back?
She's studying at Rutgers, so she's finishing.
So the whole family thing.
Yeah. So
Everyone's been to Rutgers.
we're all Rutgers people. We're all Scarlet Knights. So she's finishing this year. So she's a senior now.
Okay.
So then she'll be done, and then she'll be out into the great wide world.
Cool.
Yeah.
Then I guess we can move on to talking about your time in Singapore in just a bit, but I do want to talk about your time in public school.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like? I know you went to New Jersey public school, right?
Yeah,
Was it with the particular name? I guess Tom's River.
Tom's River High School North.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and that is like the local, there were 3 schools. So there was East, South, North, and then there was a private school. So one where you would have paid tuition every year. And I think the good thing about, or what I am thankful for from my public school education was that it really honored and really highlighted the importance of giving back. Like you can take all these AP classes, but if it doesn't amount to you doing good in the world and good on your own definitions, good being helping somebody or helping your family or whatever you'd like to do, then what is the value of it then? So I think that was one really good thing. And I think just there were no like random barriers or anything arbitrary that kept you from doing exactly what you wanted to do, because you do have a lot of autonomy. Even you'd meet with a counselor and I'd say, okay, I want to do this, I'd want to do that. And they were like, okay, done. It's really, and maybe that's a like part of the American system as well, where they're just quite trusting in the individual and they're respectful of what the individual would like to do, and then they just let them do that.
And were you doing the APs or were you doing the American curriculum?
So I took APs.
Oh, okay.
New Jersey has its own state curriculum.
Which you have to do anyways,
Yeah,
right?
so there's like a certain amount of requirements you have to meet for
What
high school
APs were you doing?
graduation. So I took AP Chem. Shout out to Gabby. And she was my lab partner. She's She was also my roommate at
Where
Rutgers.
she end up? Oh,
Yeah.
oh my God, you guys went to Rutgers together. Okay.
Yeah. So she's a real one.
Where is she now?
She's working in real estate
Oh, okay.
in New Jersey.
Okay, cool.
So I took AP Chem because I think I pressured myself a lot. A lot of my friends wanted to go into STEM fields and they were all taking AP Chem and they were like, come on, let's go. Even though I was not the strongest student in this subject, that's for sure. And then I didn't do very well on the exam. I got a 2. So yeah, but that was a really well-earned 2. I felt like the amount of studying and the amount of like titrations and polyatomic molecules like haunting me to this day. But then of course the subjects where I excelled were like AP Lit and AP Lang, and it was almost an inherent interest where I just was keen to do those things, learn more about those things, to write and reflect on what we were talking about in those classes.
Have you ever been a writer?
A bit, I would say.
Sort of
It's
what
kind of
had
my-
fan fiction? Or?
Yeah, like a big
Really?
I was a big old fan fiction girl.
But on fan fiction or what?
Fanfiction.net.
Yeah, but like fan fiction
Like
or
Twilight, Hunger Games, Harry Potter, Degrassi, that Canadian like drama show. I think writing is kind of, it is an aspiration,
Mhm.
but I also think I've qualified it more like, is it just writing something like the Hunger Games that's going to sell millions of copies and make a movie? Or is it just like writing a simple poem and then someone reads it in a small local press? So I'd say that's how I kind of define my success metrics and what it means to be a writer to me.
Yeah, no, I
So-
guess that is really cool. And again, I mean, there's so many years for you to continue writing
Mhm.
and see your work take off, right? Whether it's
Yeah.
fan fiction or whether it's fiction or non-fiction or whatever it is.
Even when people would comment like, love this, where's chapter 2?
You're like, yes.
And I like never wrote chapter 2,
Oh.
but like even like older faith, I'm like, yeah, like
Still looking at those comments from chapter 1. You're like,
yeah.
chapter 2 is coming soon.
yes, don't worry. If I can even get my login back.
How did you feel about the education system or the sort of style of education in the public school? You told me that there were no exams, right?
So they were unless you were taking AP, we had exams, but I'd say like when my husband says exam and when I say exam, it means very
Two
different
different.
things. Even when I would administer exams as a teacher, oftentimes the exam is something that students receive as kind of a benchmark. So let's say I'm the French 1 teacher. I give you a French 1 exam and you bomb it, right? You get maybe a 0. I don't
Mhm.
put that in the grade book. I just say, yeah, like it's your first day of French class. Of course, you did not perform very well. You got maybe 3 out of 25 just by guessing. Then later, at the end of the year, I'll reintroduce that exam and then students will obviously improve, right? Some will improve to getting full marks, some maybe to B+ range and so on. So I'd say the only intense hardcore exams we had were if you were taking APs. So if you were looking for college rigor, they did kind of advise you to follow up on that path.
And why did you, well, I'll get to Rutgers in a second, but I know that you were pretty active in certain communities, right? Outside of academics in school, particularly the swim team.
I'm not like a jock, but it was such a good experience for me. I don't think I've ever
Just
been...
showing up in your muscle tees tomorrow.
Yeah, no, tomorrow I'll be ready for our rock climbing event.
Yeah.
But it was such a good, I think it's more on like, I've never had such camaraderie with a group of women. And at such a young age, I thought that was so important. So I feel like if I eventually have a daughter, actually sports I think are one of the most important things I can enroll her in and ensure that she participates in. And swimming, like maybe I was like middle of the pack. I wasn't like winning all my events. I wasn't like Bad News Bears
But
either.
as far as the organization goes, you were pretty senior.
Yeah. So by this, like my 4th year, I was the captain. So my last year of high school. But I'd say it's also not
Senior year.
Yeah, my senior year. It's not a metric of like, oh, like Faith is the fastest swimmer, but it's like you're elected by your peers and they just choose whomever to represent them. So there were other captains as well. It's not like I'm gonna come back and bully everyone like in those high school movies and be like, I'm the captain, you know? But it was, again, I think they really viewed these kind of like extracurriculars as a big part of what makes you who you are and prepares you to set out into the world and chart your course.
In high school, so I went to boarding school and sports was a massive thing. There was always this system where the captain would always be this sort of like figure that was above everyone else. At the same time, like calm and commanding, he would do no yelling. And then there was the vice captain who would typically be pretty close to the captain and would do all the yelling. Right? So he'd do like all the like granular work of getting people there, yelling at people who were late, and just making sure everybody was doing their job right. Anyway, so when you were talking about the sports thing, it just brought back fun memories.
No, we had three. So there was a good cop. There was a bad cop.
Were you the good cop?
No, I was the peace cop.
Oh, you were the peace
I wasn't even good. I was no cop related energy.
You were just
at all.
smiling.
I was just like, good job, you did great. So.
And swimming was something you wanted to continue at university, right?
Yeah, so I'd say with the US admissions journey, it's very wide open.
Mm-hmm.
Not that like you can really customize and you're kind of given, again, like you are in high school, you're given a very open playing field to choose what you'd like to do. So I had some friends who were really like, I want to run cross country in college. I'm quite amenable to going to any school. I just would like to run. I think that's a really important thing I'd like to continue. So there were some friends that pursued that directly. For me, I had really wanted to swim. And there's this small liberal arts college in New York that I wanted to go to.
Sarah Lawrence.
Yeah, Sarah Lawrence. I wanted to go there and swim. But it's also, again, like if I'm going to rank my priorities, practicality was a big one. So in the end, Rutgers kind of made the best offer and it had the most to offer academically. I liked swimming, but I was probably a better student than I was a swimmer. So I did want to lean into that a bit more as I got ready for college and then my eventual career.
That's all for today's episode of Dear Applicants. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you found the content valuable and insightful. If you'd like to learn more about our guests or the topics we discussed, be sure to check out our show notes for links and further resources.